We're going to be laying out the tent sections to start the layout of the tent.
When you're unloading your tent sections from your vehicle, you want to be extremely careful that you do not snag the sections on any sharp edges.
You can have as many center sections as you want. In other words, there can be as many center poles as you want. And right now they've got the two end pieces and then the center piece in the middle.
Now Josiah is going to take the tent bag off of the tent section. You need to make very sure that when you lay the tent section over to begin unrolling the tent section, that you do not allow anyone to pull the rope out from underneath the tent section like you see here. The weight of the tent section on the rope will cause friction on the tent if the rope is pulled out from underneath the tent, and it will actually burn a hole in the tent. Once you have all your tent sections safely untied, then you begin to roll them all out in a long line like you see Josiah and the other guys doing here. It makes no difference whether you have 2 sections or 4 or 5 sections. They still will all be rolled out in a long line end to end prior to the unfolding. Now you can see Mike and the other men there unfolding the first end section, one fold at a time, to prevent abrasion on the tent. Over and over, they will unfold it until it's completely unfolded. In this case, since it's a 60 by 90 tent that they are installing, there are 3 sections, 2 end sections and 1 middle section. The first end section is already unfolded, and now the guys are unfolding the center section. After that, they will unfold the last end section. Then all the sections will be ready to start lacing together. Okay, now Josiah is going to explain to us how to lace the tent up.
What we're going to do is we're going to take these rings are together? Yeah. Okay. This is center right here. You're going to take your first rope on your lace side. Okay. Your first deal. Stick it through your first loop. Okay. First hole. Pull it through. Take your second one. Stick it through the second hole. Put it through the first one. Jerk. Pinch it up? Yep. Pretty much do that the whole way down.
This sequence just continues over and over all the way from the center to the perimeter.
You've reached the end of the row.
Yes, sir. When you get here, you got a rope that's a little bit longer. It's the second one from the end. This one here is a little bit longer than the rest of them. This one, all you do is you take and put through this hole. You take this one. Actually, this one goes back through this one. And the only thing you do different here is this one goes through here, comes back the opposite way. Pull it back. So basically all I did was took this one, did the same thing up to here, and instead of going like this like I usually would, see, like this, I'm going to go like this, back the opposite way. And I'm going to take it, I'm going to wrap it around, pull it through like this. Twice.
Like
That's
a little
it.
half inch.
Yes, sir. And then you just snap, you have one more snap on the very end here. You just take it, snap it. That's it.
John, what's this flap here?
It's called a weather flap. And it covers your lace line to keep rain from getting through your lace line. It's just a piece of cloth, piece of material that goes over the top of it. And it ropes down and it keeps rain and everything out of that lace line.
Right.
The main thing is make sure it's snapped and tied properly.
Nice half.
The lace line rope should be tied off in a double knot like you see here. Hey Mike, why don't you show us how to string up the rope for the weather flap? Let's watch closely because this is important. What you do is you take the end of the weather flap rope and you go through the first ring on the large triangle like you see there, and then you go through the second ring on the triangle, and then through the flap, and then through the ring on the tent and back through the ring on the flap. You just continue to zigzag all the way down to the end of the tent.
You get to the end, you want to make sure you pull all the slack out of the rope. Because you want all your slack at the bottom edge instead of the top edge. Because it'll make it easier. Once you get the tent, you got to go back and readjust these strings to pull tension on them. But you just tie it off on the edge, leaving enough slack. So when the tent goes up, yeah. So when the tent goes up, it doesn't. If you pull this real tight, it's going to pop every one of these rings up. So
Not a good thing.
So you want to make sure you have enough slack, and that all the slack's on the edge and not at the center portion of the tent. And that's a weather flag. We're going to stretch the tent out to get proper spacing for the stakes.
All right.
We can get two guys to stand on the corners here. Me and Josiah will go down and we'll stretch out the other end.
And after it's stretched out, then you'll know where
the actual stakes will be.
Now it's time to stretch the tent out and try to get all the edges in the perimeter of the tent nice and straight so that we'll know exactly where to put the stake. This way we can get the stakes in the proper location and make sure that everything is nice and square.
The reason for having the tent, the webbing, the edge of the tent actually laying on top of the other tent section is you want the webbing in a straight line because the center sections are actually longer in width. If you were to stretch it out flat, it would be longer in width than from corner to corner.
So that's why we flap the middle in here.
Right.
Before you can run a string line, you have to set your corner stakes. At each corner you will set 2 stakes 5 feet away from the corner of the tent. What the guys are doing here is they're driving round and round the tent, throwing out all of the stakes, getting ready to line the stakes up just before they actually start driving the stakes into the ground.
Line up the stakes in a straight line along the edge of the tent using a string line.
All right. So this is the Cobra Lifesaver.
Now it's time to throw out all of the side poles in preparation for raising the perimeter. The easiest way to do this, if you have the room, is simply to drive around the tent with your vehicle and throw the poles out in the approximate location of each stake. Okay, the hardware is all ready and we can start raising the perimeter of the tent. Before you know it, the tent will be up and ready to use.
Okay, we're raising a corner. And this is the windward side, right? You always do the side facing the wind?
Actually, we're going to go around to the downwind side.
Okay.
We'll start with the windward corner, then we'll work the downwind side. And then the very last side that'll go up will be the windward side.
Okay.
Josiah, why don't you show us how to tie these ropes in a knot?
It's very simple, but you just go under, twist it like that, put that over that. See, then when you want to tighten it, all you got to do is push this through there, and it'll tighten.
Tying the ropes can be a little bit tricky, but it's just a simple double half hitch. First of all, you stand up all 4 corners, and then, as you've seen, you put all the side poles on all 4 sides of the perimeter, and you hook up each rope and tie the knot to the stake. Now, the idea is to keep the ropes real loose, just enough to hold the tent in place, but not too tight. The ropes need to be loose so that you have enough slack to insert the quarter poles and all of the center poles. Later on, you'll have time to come back and tighten the ropes.
Okay, the wind's blowing this way. So this is the last corner we do.
Now that the last corner has been raised, All we have to do is go back and raise just a few more poles on this last side, and we'll be ready to start inserting the quarter poles and the center poles. Today we're lucky because we have some wind that'll help us raise the tent, and it'll make it a whole lot easier. You can actually see how the wind is raising the tent, trying to lift it up. Now let's watch while Mike shows us how to tie the jump rope on the side pole.
Take the side where the rope's coming off the ring, wrap it around, through, bring it up just below the band, pull it tight this way, bring it back the opposite direction. One more time, around and through, pull it tight, and wrap it around the pole above each wrap each time, and then tuck it underneath.
What does this do? It keeps the
pole if the tent starts jumping, the pole stays in, and it won't fall over and hit something.
All right, and we have to do this on every
side
pole.
Every side pole, every center pole.
I'll have the jump up rope.
Jumper rope or side pole.
Okay. First quarter pole. And we're starting in the same quadrant that we did with putting the side poles up.
Correct. We're going to start on the windward side. As you can see, the wind starts lifting the tent for you. Take the pole. Start pushing it.
How tall is this pole?
14 foot.
You're doing a similar kind of jumper rope.
Right.
There.
Same as the side pole. The only difference is it's got 2 half hitches at the top, one close to the top, one about 2 foot down, and then the wrapping at the bottom.
Okay, so there's the half hitch at the top, 2 feet down, and one down here.
The wrap about eye level.
After you get the quarter poles in, if your tent has quarter poles, then it's time to insert the center poles. The first thing you need to do is put the pin that is on the top end of the pole through both of the large metal rings where the lace lines come together. You can see it here in this shot, how you have the 2 rings and the pin goes right through both rings. Then you take your rope and you make a half hitch there on the pole with the rope. This helps keep the pole from falling out if someone unties the rope. You'll also put a second knot about 2 feet below that one, another half hitch. And when they raise the center pole, you'll notice that they only raise it about halfway because you really won't be able to push the pole up all the way until you get a couple more center poles in to help you. You do them in sequence, just a little bit on the first pole, and then you go put the next pole in, and then you'll come back and straighten all the poles up once you have them all inserted. After you push the pole up, you'll wrap the end of the rope around and around the pole several times and tuck it in. If your tent has quarter poles, you don't really push them straight up and down. You'll want to leave them at about a 30-degree angle like you see here. The quarter pole needs to push outward against the tent. This helps keep the tent much tighter than if you just have the pole pushed straight up and down. One thing to remember, as soon as you push a quarter pole or a center pole up, you need to immediately tie it off so the pole cannot fall out and injure someone or tear your tent. If the rope is not tied, any movement of the tent will allow the pole to fall down, and it could potentially damage your tent or injure someone that's working underneath the tent. After you get the poles up, then you need to align the center poles in a straight line so that your tent will tighten up properly. There are several ways to line up the center poles, but the main object is to make sure that each center pole is completely vertical and square with the ground. This will help your tent to be nice and square and tighten in the right shape. Once you have the center poles all lined up nice and straight, then it's time to start tightening the tent. The normal procedure is to tighten one corner first, rather loosely or just snug, and then go to the opposite corner and tighten it up good and tight. After that, you go to the opposite end of the tent and you will tighten those 2 corners as tight as you can. You probably will have to return to the first end of the tent and tighten the first 2 corners at least one more time before you get all 4 corners real tight. Now is a good time to go tighten the weather flap ropes. If you remember, we left them loose at the beginning of the video. Now is a good time to untie the rope, pull all the slack out, and then retie it so that it's good and tight. This will keep the rainwater from oozing underneath the flap and keep the flap from flopping in the wind. Also, now you have to go back and tighten all your side ropes and all your side poles one by one all the way around the perimeter of the tent to get everything extremely tight. It's difficult to over tighten it. You want to get it just as tight as you possibly can. When you get through, the tent should be real tight inside and out. If it's very windy, you may have to go around the tent several times, retightening all the ropes over and over till you get everything tight. When it's time to hang the wall, you simply decide where you want your door, and that's where you start to hang the wall. First of all, you unroll the roll, like you see here, and then you hang the end of the wall wherever you want your doorway to start. That piece of wall will unroll in one direction, and your next piece of wall will unroll in the opposite direction. This is where later on you can fold the overlapping pieces back to create a doorway. Each roll of wall gets stretched out in a long line like you see here, and then you hang it little by little with the snaps onto the rope, stretching the wall as you go. Each wall overlaps the other 5 feet. And the way you can tell where the 5-foot mark is, each piece of material in the wall is 5 feet, so every 5 feet you have a seam. Anyway, you continue this process over and over until you get all the way around the tent.